Welcome to Engage, leading conversations that matter. Join in the conversation. Send an email to engage@cfpublic.org. Send a recorded talkback message on the free Central Florida Public Media app. Leave a voicemail by calling 407-273-2300, extension 246. Engage is made possible with the support of listeners like you.
You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Coming up, drowning is the #1 cause of death in children with autism. We'll learn about why and some life-saving information to prevent it from happening. Also, Metallica is paying for Central Floridians to learn trades and skills that are being invested right back into this community. And an update from local supervisors of elections on these final days of early voting happening now. First, 2 of the 4 candidates hoping to become the state's next state attorney for the 9th Judicial Circuit are on the ballot for next week's primary election. This position covers both Orange and Osceola counties, and it serves about 1.9 million residents. As Central Florida Public Media's Marian Summerall reports, some are hoping to move beyond the politics of this race and onto what they say is really at stake here, people's lives.
So in order to get beyond the politics, that's actually where we're going to start, by addressing the elephant in the room.
Prosecutors have a duty to faithfully enforce the law. One's political agenda cannot trump this solemn duty.
That was the sound from the press event Governor Ron DeSantis held after removing former state attorney Monique Worrell from office last year, accusing her of neglecting her duty and not prosecuting more crimes. In her place, DeSantis put the current state attorney Andrew Bain, a former Orange County judge. While both Bain, no party affiliation, and Worrell, a Democrat, are already on November's ballot because they don't face a challenger in the primary, Republican voters in Orange and Osceola counties on Tuesday will choose between 2 Republicans. One of the candidates is Thomas Fighter, an Army veteran and a former prosecutor who currently owns a criminal defense law firm. In a YouTube video posted to his page, he says he's running to ensure
a culture where every prosecutor is properly equipped and trained in enforcing our laws with the highest level of ethics and integrity.
His opponent, Seth Hyman, has a very similar background. He's a former assistant state attorney and a criminal defense attorney. He worked under 2 former state attorneys, Jeffrey Ashton and Aramis Ayala, but he was fired from his position. If elected, he says his goal is simple.
I'm running because I want to protect our community.
While there are more eyes on this race because of the politics surrounding it, for Desmond Meade, it goes much deeper. Meade is a 2021 MacArthur Genius Grant winner and founder of the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. He also spent 15 years behind bars and now works to create a better reentry path for people leaving prison. But what if so many people didn't end up there to begin with?
If I could have a state attorney that could prevent somebody from breaking into my car, I'd rather have that type of state attorney than a state attorney that's going to prosecute somebody after they broke into my car.
Meade says the state attorney's ideas around crime and rule of law are crucial, not only when it comes to diversion programs after someone has committed a crime, but also prevention and supporting programs that keep young people especially on the right track. Attorney Richard Hornsby says the counties need consistency in the office, as well as someone who's a good communicator. Hornsby worked as an assistant public defender for the 9th Judicial Circuit from 2000 to 2005.
When you have consistency, you can properly advise people on how their cases are likely to resolve.
Hornsby also says it's important to elect someone who prosecutes and resolves cases quickly, efficiently, and fairly, something he says he hasn't seen with the past several state attorneys.
If they don't have a good working relationship, the criminal justice system can kind of grind to a halt.
Early voting is currently underway for Tuesday's primary election, where either Thomas Fighter or Seth Hyman will be chosen to face off in November against incumbent Andrew Bain and suspended state attorney Monique Worrell. Marian Summerall, Central Florida Public Media.
Marion Summerall joins Engage now. So, Marion, talk to us about the importance of the role of a state attorney. Is this someone who's going to head into a court and argue cases?
Yeah, so the state attorney is the lawyer in the state that represents the government. So if someone sues the state of Florida for violating their rights, for example, the state attorney will represent Florida. There are 20 circuits in Florida, so there are 20 state attorneys. Their job is to execute the law. They will review evidence given to them by police and make a decision on whether or not there is sufficient evidence to bring charges against somebody. They could drop the charges or tell investigators to bring more evidence forward. And they can also offer immunity to someone in order to get them to testify. I spoke with Eric Small, a professor of philosophy at Rollins College, who teaches courses in philosophy of law and politics, and he explains the state attorney is important for several reasons.
First, on the community side, you want your state attorney to be involved in justice. So their role is to execute the law to achieve justice. And so you want to make sure that you have a state attorney that has a lot of integrity, that won't allow charges to go forward, that does not have sufficient evidence. And you want to make sure that your state attorney is not prosecuting people who shouldn't be prosecuted. They may have been accused. There's not a lot of evidence, but state attorneys that bring charges against people can cause a lot of damage because those people would have to spend money to get a lawyer. They'd have to take time off of work. They might get convicted even though they're not guilty and then thrown in jail.
And the other reason Small says a state attorney is important is because even if you aren't being the one charged with the crime, you may be involved with them because one of your family members was charged, not to mention that a state attorney works to prosecute crime, which can help the public feel safer.
Okay, so tell us about how a state attorney can have an impact on a community, maybe public safety or policy. What are they doing on a local level?
So Small says they can change how crime is prosecuted, right? So generally speaking, you could have a very tough state attorney that goes after crime with full force and rigor, or you could have a more relaxed state attorney that's looking to prosecute very serious crimes, crimes where people or property are damaged or harmed, and not worrying so much about small, petty crimes. There are other ways a state attorney can impact a local community also, Small says.
So they can affect the perception of how the crime will be prosecuted within their circuit. So that's one thing. But they could also affect how the police interact with the people in their circuit. Because they work directly with the police will come to know, oh, this state attorney will require you to bring a lot of evidence before them before you can proceed with the prosecution of a person. Or you might have a state attorney that's very laxed on it and they don't require much evidence at all. Police will know that after working with the person for years. They'll know that they'll have to gather up a lot of evidence. They'll know that they won't have to gather up a lot of evidence depending on the relationship and the requirements of the state attorney. So they could affect the way in which the police carry out their jobs. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, I would say lastly, when it comes to the public, they could affect the relationship between the public and the criminal justice system by staying constantly in contact with the public. So they can come forward and make statements on various types of crimes. They can come forward and make statements on the level of safety that they're looking to achieve. And that gives the public a sense of how the state attorney is going to operate within their circuit.
So what Small is saying is, in that sense, the state attorney can really set a standard and a tone for safety in the community.
Okay, Central Florida Public Media reporter Marion Summerall, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And hey, be sure to check out the Central Florida Public Media Voter Guide to know the candidates, the issues, and the deadlines you need to know for election season. You can find it at cfpublic.org. There is more ahead here on Engage. We'll check in with the Lake and Brevard County Supervisor of Elections on how early voting is going and the information people need to know from the polls. We are streaming live now at cfpublic.org. That is also where you can find all of our episodes available on demand. You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Ahead on this program, The warm weather and sunny skies of our region make swimming an ideal pastime. But all of the pools, the lakes, and the ponds, they can pose a grave danger to children.
Just in Florida, if we look at our numbers, so currently, as of today, we are at 79 children total that we've lost in Florida just this year to drowning.
We will learn how youth on the spectrum are especially susceptible to the dangers of drowning. Right now, though, early voting ends this weekend ahead of the primary in Florida this Tuesday, August the 20th. Brevard County Supervisor of Elections Tim Bobanek is visiting polling places today. He joined Engage earlier this afternoon for an update, and I started this conversation by asking Bobanek how popular early voting is in Brevard.
Early voting has always been a popular method for voting, and we are seeing an increase in turnout in early voting compared to the last couple of elections. We are on pace to have the highest early voting turnout that we've seen in a primary. We saw the first day that we had of early voting on Saturday was the highest we've ever seen for a first day of primary early voting, and I think that trend's going to continue.
People can early vote in any site within their county. They don't have to go to their regular polling place, correct?
That is correct. Yes, we use what's called ballot on demand technology. So where we can print the voter's ballot, their precinct specific ballot on demand. So any voter can go to any early voting site. And that's the same through all of the counties throughout Florida.
Can you make sure that the audience knows the rules for submitting early voting for the primary?
Okay, so for early voting is in person. And as a reminder, Florida is a closed primary state. So you have to be a registered voter in that party 29 days before Election Day if you want to participate in that party's primary. So if you want to vote a Republican ballot, you have to be a registered Republican 29 days before the election. Same thing with Dems. Now, all of the other voters that are not Republican and Dems, at least in Brevard County, will fall under what we call a nonpartisan ballot. So the NPAs and the minor party voters will all get a single ballot, which primarily is judicial races, school board races. In Brevard County, we've got a couple of municipalities that have primaries as well. Those are open to all voters. They're on all ballots. But if you are a no party or a minor party voter in Brevard, you will only see those races on your ballot. Whereas, you have state house members and Senate members and the constitutional offices in Brevard County. Those are all going to be on the Republican primary ballot.
And you were telling me a bit about turnout. Does that give you an indication of what turnout might look like for the general election in November, what you're seeing happening now?
Well, I mean, anytime we have a presidential election, you're always going to have, that's the highest turnout election we have. In Brevard, primary elections typically range from 25 to 35% turnout. I'm hopeful that we'll be on the higher end of that. But when we get into the general elections, you're especially a presidential, you're going to be, a much higher percentage just because you have so much focus on that president race. And the other thing that's going to really drive turnout, I think, in this presidential election is the amendments on the ballot. You have some, very controversial or contentious amendments that people are very strongly opinionated about between the abortion and the medical marijuana and the recreational marijuana, as well as some other amendments that are on the ballot as well.
And can you clarify what people need to know about being registered to vote for the Florida primary, August 20th, versus a general election? Just what do people need to understand with all the changes going on?
So the registration deadlines are the same for every election. It's 29 days before the election itself. So, obviously that deadline has passed for the primary election, but for the general election, again, it's October 7th is the deadline to register. Now, unlike a primary, any voter, no matter what their party is, can vote for any candidate on the ballot because everybody gets the same ballot. They all get the same precinct ballot, and you'll see, the presidential candidates for Republicans, for Dems, for, NPAs, Libertarian, whatever parties qualify. But again, primary, because we're a closed primary state, you're limited to being whoever's in that party at that time 29 days before. But general elections, anybody can vote in any ballot.
What other information do you think people need to understand about this early voting that's happening?
Well, again, you can go to any early voting site, but I wanted to kind of switch gears and talk about mail ballots because, the deadline, we can't be mailing any ballots out anymore. That deadline passed last week. And I would strongly encourage voters, if you've not returned your mail ballot At this point, I would recommend bringing that mail ballot either to your supervisor of elections office, or all of the early voting sites have secure ballot intake stations where you can deposit that mail ballot. The one thing I don't have any control over is the United States Postal Service. So if you drop your ballot in, Florida law is very specific. It has to be at the supervisor of elections office by 7 p.m. on election night. So if you drop your mail ballot in now and it doesn't get to us in time, regardless of the postmark, regardless of when you put it in that mailbox, if we don't have it by 7 p.m., it's not going to be able to be counted. There's a lot of news media about all of these mailers that are going out and voter guides and so forth. And my office, we mail a sample ballot to all registered voters, and we also have sample ballots available on our website. So do that research. Don't walk into a voting booth and that's the first time that you've seen these candidates' names. Take the time to research them so that you have a plan of who you're going to vote for when you get to that voting booth. There's plenty of resources out there to do research on the candidates, and I highly recommend doing that. What I also encourage voters to do is to check the status of their registration. And if they're going to vote on election day, make sure you know where your polling place is. On Vote Brevard, you can click on Find My Precinct and it'll tell you exactly where your polling place is. Sometimes polling places change in between elections. We've not had a countywide election in 2 years, and the school board did a redistricting in the last year in Brevard County. And so some of the polling places changed because we had to redraw some boundary lines and some precincts. So check that to make sure. Everybody would have gotten a voter information card if they had a change telling them what their new polling place was. So I like to say be election ready. So go to your supervisor of elections website, check your registration status, know where you have to vote if you're going to wait till election day. And just remember, election day is your last chance to vote. It's your last opportunity to vote. None of our sites have lines for early voting. You can walk in and walk right out again. And while I don't anticipate election day, it is that last chance to vote.
Tim Bobanek is the supervisor of elections for Brevard County. Within the last hour, we also checked in with Lake County Supervisor of Elections Alan Hayes to see how turnout is for early voting there.
I would say it's about average. Probably by the time we finish the early voting on Saturday, I would expect that we'll be in the 20 to 25% of our voters early voting. And typically prior to 2020, we had usually a third voted early, a third by mail, and a third on election day. So we'll be getting back toward that same ratio, I expect, by the end of the early voting period this time.
Supervisor Hayes, why is it important to vote in the primary? How do you get voters engaged in this election?
Have been trying to, you've asked me two questions there. Let me answer the first one. Why is it important? Because several very important races are going to be decided in this primary election. People seem to focus on the presidential election and the governor's election, the big offices, when in fact, your county commissioners, your school board members, your constitutional officers, those are the people that are making decisions that affect your life every day. And so these are the races that are determined many times in the August primary. And it's very important that everybody get out and vote. Rather than having the 25 to 30% of the voters, we really wish that we would have 75 or 80% of our voters take the primary election seriously and come out and vote in this primary election. But we have judges that are going to be elected. We have school board members that will be elected. We have county commissioners that are going to be elected. The supervisor of elections here in Lake County is going to be on this ballot. And it'll for all practical purposes, it'll be decided in August. So that's why. How do we encourage more people? We do it through our website. We do it through social media. We do it through various events. When we go to outreach events, we try everything that we know of to encourage people to, number one, if you're eligible, we want you to register. And if you're registered, we want you to take the time to become an informed voter, learn about the candidates and what they stand for, and learn about the issues that are going to be on the ballot, and then go to the polls and vote as an informed voter. It's very important also to make sure you look at those races that are down, we call them down ballot races, the ones that are down there toward the bottom of the ballot, and don't be a victim of ballot fatigue and get tired of coloring the ovals and just say, well, those, I don't know them. And then, of course, if you don't know them, sometimes it is better to not vote. But it's just a matter, we wish more people took their voting responsibility more seriously and would come out and vote. I would like to say a huge thank you to the thousands of election workers all across this state that go to training classes for each individual election. They sit there and they soak up all of the nuances that need to be refreshed. Some are new ideas that have been put on the statutes, those new ideas that the legislature has mandated. But we could not do what we do on election day if it were not for those thousands of men and women that take their time, come out there on election day and man those polling places. They are a real, true key to our success. And hopefully the voters will take a moment and just say thank you to the workers that are out there in the polling places. We really appreciate those folks.
And that was Lake County Supervisor of Elections, Alan Hayes. Last week, Volusia County deputies rescued a 5-year-old boy from drowning. The child was autistic, and unfortunately, this type of scenario happens with relative frequency, and the results are often tragic. 2 documented cases in Orange County this summer involved young children on the spectrum wandering away from home, eventually drowning in area retention ponds and lakes. We've learned that children with autism are at a greater risk of drowning. So we asked Stacy Hoagland to join Engage. She is the mother of a son with autism and president of the Autism Society of Florida, which is based in Orlando. The Society reports drowning is the leading cause of death for people on the spectrum, and Florida leads the way. So we started the conversation with Hoagland by asking, why is that the case?
There was actually a study that came out some years ago that was done by Columbia University that said that children with autism are 160 times more likely to die from drowning than typically developing kids. And that is just based on the deaths that we know about. If we look at just in Florida, if we look at our numbers, so currently as of today, we are at 79 children total that we've lost in Florida just this year to drowning. And almost 30% of those kids were kids who had been diagnosed with autism. Now, the other thing that we know, if we look at the CDC, who tracks autism and statistics of autism across the United States, they tell us that most children who are diagnosed with autism, they receive that diagnosis on average at 4.5. But if we look at those 79 children who have died, most of them, they were barely even 3. Most of them were 1 and 2 years old. And so, of course, as an autism advocate, I'm wondering, so as many people within my community, how many of those children would have later been diagnosed? So we believe that we're just on the tip of the iceberg. And so the reason for that, it's sort of multifaceted. In children with autism, the AUT in autism is self, right? They are self-directed. They don't really have a natural propensity like many young children do, that they're going to let mom and dad know when something strikes their fancy, like they see something really cool outside. These kids, I see it. It looks really interesting. I'm going to go for it. Or it could also be that this environment where I am right now is very overwhelming. There are too many people in my space. It's loud. The TV is going. I'm very uncomfortable. My sensory system is just really facing some challenges right now. But I know if I go outside, it's going to be much more calm. I'm going to be able to calm down. My senses are going to just kind of become more aligned. You go outside, and then, of course, if there's a body of water out there, I mean, everybody looks at bodies of water as being tranquil, right? That's why we go to the beach. That's why we lay out by the pool, because it's tranquil, it's calming. And then we add the other component that water gives us a sensory experience unlike anything else. When any of us are under the water, there's pressure, right? I mean, anybody who dives can explain all the details about pressure and how we feel pressure when we're under the water. And for a person with autism who really craves that feeling of pressure across their body, you know, that could be an amazing sensory experience. And so they don't always have that element of natural fear that many of us just are kind of born into. And so if we give them a swimming lesson, but not enough, it could remove any potential fear that they might have had of the water. And then they're drawn to it because they've had that prior experience. They liked it. It was cool. I had mom and dad here with me. This was pretty awesome. And maybe I had water wings on my arms. I was floating. And they make the assumption that they're going to jump in the water and the same thing's going to happen. And it's not.
Am I hearing you say that you can't just train someone with autism how to swim in a pool because it's a completely different association they have than if one of these retention ponds that we have all over Central Florida? You have to actually help them understand that both of them can be dangerous?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I don't encourage people to drop their kids into retention ponds for sure. That is not something I would do. But anybody who's ever stepped a foot into a lake, you guys know lakes are slimy and the bottoms are grassy, and it's very different than a pool. So the entire sensory experience of just being even in a nice clean lake is very different than a swimming pool. But no, I'm not suggesting that, but I am suggesting getting them into multiple pools. So maybe go to their city pool. If a friend, a neighbor has a pool, going to the YMCA pool. So getting into different pools so that they can kind of just have that experience, and really that the parent can make sure that when there's not, an instructor there saying, okay, step down here, do this, do that. And it's just like free time, if you will, at a pool. We want the kids to be able to have that experience. We also want to make sure that parents know not just CPR, which is one of the things that our organization does in partnership with the fire chiefs across the state of Florida. And that's been a really great program, is teaching the parents CPR. But also, when their kid is in the pool, teaching them that when you throw a float out to them, that they understand how to grab it, or if you have a hook, making sure they know how to grab it. Because making the assumption that if you can't swim as an adult, you really need to know how to swim. If your kids are going to be in water, anywhere near water, you got to know how to swim. So that's one thing. But we do have sometimes where we have families that the parents can't swim. So we really want to make sure that those parents work with their kids on understanding, when you throw a float to me, what do I do? I got to put my arm inside and then I paddle over to the side. Because we really shouldn't make the assumption that if we throw a float out to a kid who may have significant autism, that they're going to understand what to do. But we also know we got to cook dinner. We got to go to the bathroom. We have to take a shower. I have a very good friend who put her child down for a nap, thinking that he was sleeping. And when she got up to check on him to see, how he was, his bedroom door was open. The sliding glass door was open, and he had died in the backyard pool. And so it can happen just like that. It doesn't take long. It is silent. A lot of people think, drowning is splashing and screaming. No, it's not. It's very quiet and it's very quick.
Do you have to then, as a parent or family caretaker of someone with autism, is wandering kind of the lead up to these drownings in a way?
Most definitely. Yeah. So we're just talking about autism. In the children who drown, who have autism, 91% of those who drown do so as a result of wandering. So it is highly connected and significant. There's some data that floats around out there that says that 48% of kids with autism wander. I have never met one parent, not one. I've been doing this for, almost about 27 years. And I've never met one parent who hasn't had that moment where you turn and you're like, oh, where'd he go? Where is she? Not that they were in the water or something, but just like you turn and they're just not there. They're not where you thought they were going to be. So I don't know where they come up with the 48%. Maybe 98% is closer to the realistic number, if you ask me. Children are inquisitive, and particularly those with autism who, again, don't have that just innate awareness to be able to say, Mom, I'm going to go outside. I want to go play. I want to go on the swings. I want to see the pool in the backyard. There's something floating in it. That's not really something that they do. If they see something floating in the pool, they want to figure out, how do I get out there and grab that thing out of the pool? And we know that if a child can't swim and they try to grab something out of the water, Chances are good they're going to fall into the water and not be able to get out. They just go towards it. It's interesting. I had fun in there yesterday, and I think I can have fun in there again. And it doesn't really matter that nobody else is in the pool. It's okay. It's nice and quiet up there now. But also, there are some physicians out there who are capturing autism earlier. So it could be that we were always losing these kids, but they just had not been yet diagnosed. And so now that we're getting a little bit better with the diagnosis coming earlier, now, that may be why our numbers are tipping a little bit.
Stacy Hoagland is the mother of a son with autism and president of the Autism Society of Florida. The Autism Society of Florida is a volunteer organization that's made up of families and people with autism. If you go to autismfl.org, you can find a special page that's all about drowning prevention. You can find a list of parent-recommended swim schools and instructors, and you can also find resources about how to talk to your kids about swimming safety. Coming up, when it comes to the best-selling bands ever, Metallica is on that list. Rolling Stone magazine says they're one of the greatest artists of all time. So we'll hear how they're providing education opportunities to Central Floridians. Just a reminder, all of our shows are available on demand at cfpublic.org, and we always want to hear from you. Let us know what you want to hear more about, maybe what you're glad you heard. You can send us an email to engage@cfpublic.org, or you can send us a talkback on the free Central Florida Public Media app. In the menu, just select Send Us a Talkback, record your question or feedback, hit send, and we will get it. And you can take it old school. Always give us a call, use voicemail. It's 407-273-2300, extension 246, and leave us one. This is Engage here on Central Florida Public Media. You are listening to Engage here on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. When Robert Blakowski discharged from the Navy a few years ago, he didn't know what to do with his life. The Orlando native took some college courses after high school, but various life events distracted him from the classroom, and at the height of the COVID pandemic, he enlisted as a machinist mate. Robert found he enjoyed working with his hands and wanted to pursue a career that allowed him to create and build things. He just didn't know where to start. That's when his best friend finally got real with him.
He brings a whole bunch of packets and puts them in front of me, and he's like, I want you to choose between these. He's like, you need to go back to school and get certified. And I was like, you're right. Like, I've been thinking about certifications for a long time. It's cheaper than a degree and just less time. And he's like, I already circled the ones you'd be interested in. And sure enough, he was right on the money. And then I saw mechatronics, and I was like, I read what it was about, and I'm like, that's exactly what I want to do.
Blakowski enrolled at Valencia College, where he had taken classes a few years earlier. He filled out paperwork for sponsorship and financial aid, and he was awarded a grant. He attended classes without questioning where the grant money came from. And then 2 weeks before graduation, his instructor pulled Robert and his classmate aside.
He was like, hey, do you guys know who sponsored you? And me and Josh looked at each other. We're like, not really. Like, because everybody else was talking to Career Source. So we're like, we don't know. And then he was like, have you ever heard of a band called Metallica? And I'm like, no freaking way. Like, what do you mean? Like, have we not heard of a band called Metallica? I grew up listening to Metallica.
Yeah, that Metallica. The band grew out of the San Francisco metal scene of the early 80s to become one of those enduring 40-year bands like the Rolling Stones or U2. They've sold well over 100 million albums, and they still pack the biggest arenas worldwide. On the side, they support a foundation called All Within My Hands that funds trade educations at 42 community colleges in 33 states, including Polk State College in Winter Haven and Valencia College in Orlando. And why did a thrash metal band with a reputation for hard partying and morbid lyricism take such an interest in supporting trade education? Here's lead singer James Hetfield from the Foundation's website to explain.
All of those people that don't fit the Ivy League road to success, we want a place for them. We feel that our music is that place for the forgotten, the invisible kids, the misfit type people that don't think they fit in. Being able to highlight and to love and to shine some heroism, some thank yous onto all of these trades and skills that are lifelong is pretty important for us.
In the decades since a generation of World War II veterans received a college education via the GI Bill, the drumbeat to success meant a 4-year degree. Here's Renee Richardson, the Director of Philanthropy with the All Within My Hands Foundation.
For a long time, colleges were just promoting what they needed to, which was academia. And I think there's a set of folks that were forgotten and maybe not, the money wasn't spent on marketing to people to say, hey, you know what? Plumbers make good money. You can work with your hands and have a wonderful career and possibly own your own business and guide your own future. So we just wanted to use Metallica's voice to shine a light on that. And then with what we do for our foundation, the Metallica Scholars Initiative in particular, I mean, we don't know from education. What do we know? So that's why we partnered with the American Association of Community Colleges. They help us find the schools. So when we started with the first 10 schools that we started with, we're like, here's our focus. We want traditional trades. We want $100,000 for 10 schools each, 100,000. So we gave $1 million that first year. And we want the focus to be on traditional trades, whether it was carpentry, automotive, truck driving, welding, manufacturing. So that's how it started. And now 6 years in, we just signed on an additional 18 schools, which brings our total to 60 community colleges in all 50 states. So we are across the nation officially as of last month, which is really exciting for us. And in total, the band has invested over $10 million in this program. We're stoked.
So what does it feel like for you, like seeing this program grow? You're going to these campuses.
It's just mind-blowing, and I feel so fortunate to meet the students, to hear these stories. We try as best we can to get all these stories up on the All Within My Hands website so that our donors can see directly who we're helping and learn a little bit more about the people whose lives are changing because of this work that we're doing together.
What kind of reaction do you get when you reveal that you're with Metallica?
Sometimes I don't tell people that's what I do. I have to read the room a little bit. A lot of times I just say I work for a family foundation. And then if people pry, I say, yeah, that family is Metallica.
That's quite the family to be a part of. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do want people to know that for these guys, this isn't lip service. We have board meetings. They're on the board. They ask really solid questions. They want to know how we're doing. They want to know what's working, what's not working. How can we be better? I mean, always this band is like, how can we do more? How can we be better? And that's why they are where they are 40 years into their career.
The All Within My Hands Metallica Scholars Initiative at Valencia supports 3 tracks of study at the college's Accelerated Skills Training Program: commercial vehicle operation, welding, and mechatronics. The mechatronics program focuses on industrial automation technology. That's a handy skill in a market with as many theme parks as we have. That's exactly how Robert Blakowski landed a plum gig at Universal Orlando, working on the park's new Epic Universe project.
I've been helping with the construction of Epic since December. Like, it's crazy to think I've already been there for going on 9 months now. Just within, a couple of weeks or so. But yeah, just that program, I mean, it's life-changing. And, there's definitely been a lot of students or former students I've run into at Universal where a lot of them was like, oh yeah, I took the mechatronics program, or oh yeah, I went to Valencia. And after the program, like knowing all the job opportunities I had, and it's life-changing. Like Universal is really, I mean, of course Valencia, but like Universal's really helped change my life. Like thanks to Valencia and their programs, I'm able to finally feel like I'm going in the right direction in my life. But I've already talked to career advisors and everything, and I've decided to return to Valencia, finish my AS in electrical and computer engineering, because I consider Universal my career now. I've been there for almost 2 years, and I want to get promoted. I want to either promote into engineering or management in the future.
It's collaborations with companies like Universal that allow Valencia graduates to acclimate into the workforce from the classroom. Carolyn McMorran is the Assistant Vice President of Professional Continuing Education at Valencia.
When employers can actually partner with us, and I mean really engage, like, Universal's gone through the content map. They know exactly what's being taught in that program. And that's the kind of relationship that we're looking for with employers in our local market, is where we can truly engage and make that impact. And then it really helps Robert in the future to be able to, he's just in the door. So now he's got opportunities to get promoted and to move up. And we often say, we're not training you for a job, we're training you for a career. And I know 4 years from now, Robert's going to call me back and say, you're not going to believe what I'm doing now.
And as far as the prestige of offering a scholarship from a 40-year-old heavy metal band,
Metallica spans multiple generations for their fans. So, I always think it's really interesting that a person like Robert in his age group is like, oh, I know exactly who a Metallica fan is. And most of our students, our average age is 33. So we will have students from 18 to 65 in a class. And what's so great about working with Metallica is all those people know who Metallica is. And so it's always really just wonderful to know that this band has had such an impact on multiple generations, which I think is really cool.
And Carolyn, what is your favorite Metallica song?
Sandman.
We'll have links to the All Within My Hands application pages for both Valencia College and Polk State College on our website, cfpublic.org. Just look for Engage under the shows and podcasts link on the homepage. That's all for today's edition of Engage. We're back Tuesday at 3 o'clock. All of our shows are available on demand at cfpublic.org. Thank you for joining us. I'm Sharon Stone. All Things Considered is coming up following NPR News.